Tuesday to all of you. Thanks for joining me as always. It is very much appreciated. Before we get started on Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots, I first want to thank every single one of you. We hit 1,000 subscribers yesterday. That number is significant in the YouTube creator world. Can't thank you enough. Continue to tell your friends and family, of course. Supporting this program is the only way it's going to survive. So I appreciate every single one of you. If you haven't subbed yet, please sub. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up on this YouTube video. Also, your comments help. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Pods, rate and review. All right, let's get to Mike Vrabel. There's lots of what is going to happen if Bill Belichick is gone. What's the next step if Belichick is fired? There's lots of talk about Belichick's future now that the Patriots are 2-7, and you could obviously understand why that is. Who is next? You know, Bill Goldberg used to say that back in the WCW days. Who's next, right? Well, you know, the Gerard Mayo talk has been all over the place, and we know that. Gerard Mayo's been mentioned. Gerard Mayo seemingly would get promoted if Belichick is let go. But is that necessarily 100%? I don't buy it's 100%. I don't think it's a guarantee just yet. So other names are getting involved. And one of the names is Mike Vrabel. He has surfaced this week as a possibility for the Patriots. It makes sense. Former Patriot Hall of Famer now. So it just kind of makes sense that you would look at former Patriots as a possibility to replace Belichick. We do the same thing with Mayo, right? So Mike Vrabel's name is popping up. And I want to handle the objection first and foremost, because I know many of you, as soon as you hear Vrabel's name, you say you can't hire a defensive guy. How in the world can you hire a defensive guy, Nick? What are you thinking? You need an offensive guy, get a new quarterback in here. That's where the NFL is going. And I understand that pushback. I understand that objection. However, I don't believe that you have to hire an offensive guy. I believe you have to hire the right guy. And it's not always an offensive mind. It's not always a 35-year-old dude who has zero head coaching experience. You have to search under every single rock. You have to make every single phone call. You need to do as much due diligence as you possibly can to replace Bill Belichick. So it doesn't have to be offensive, defensive, special teams. It just has to be the right guy. You look at what Houston's done. And it's kind of interesting because you have Nick Caserio, obviously, down there in Houston calling the shots. And they hired DeMeco Ryans, defensive guy, former defensive player in the NFL, right? Highly regarded as a player. Did really good things in San Francisco as the D coordinator. He gets hired as the head coach down in Houston. They bring in Bobby Slowick, also from San Francisco, and that offensive system. And he is their offensive coordinator. And they drafted at the top C.J. Stroud, who's been terrific, who was bananas this past weekend, 5 touchdowns, almost 500 yards. Stroud is off to an incredible start. So in that case, you had Houston go with a defensive guy as the head coach, a young mind offensive coach and coordinator, and then you draft the quarterback at the top of the draft, and things are working out pretty well so far in Houston. People thought that they would be terrible. They're in the playoff hunt. And I know that's one guy, but there have been other coaches that have worked, right? I mean, Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh has done a really good job. John Harbaugh is a guy who is from special teams. So just get the right guy. So what's going on with Vrabel? Well, why is everybody talking about Mike Vrabel? Well, Pro Football Talks Mike Florio. I don't know when he became the guy, but apparently he's the guy with Patriots rumors now. Going back to the Washington stuff from last week, now he's got this Vrabel stuff. And Florio wrote this week, what about Vrabel? Someone with a pretty good feel for the way things work threw that idea out there to us in early July. So interestingly enough, what we're getting is a lot of this talk had been happening behind the scenes regarding Belichick's future, like well before this season, right? We had the report that Kraft and Belichick hammered out some kind of an extension. Burt Breer said over the last few days that he had heard about Belichick in Washington for over the last year. That's been talked about in certain circles. And now Mike Florio says that he had heard going back to July that Vrabel could actually be an option for the Patriots if they moved on from Belichick. So it's very fascinating that we're getting all of these reports over the last couple of weeks. Ever since this team has started to truly spiral towards the bottom of the league, we're We're getting all of these stories about Belichick's future and how the Patriots discussed it and how certain guys have been mentioned. So it almost makes you feel like the groundwork had been laid well before this season was kicked off. Just an interesting note. All right, so what do I think about Vrabel? 100% worth consideration. I think if you don't consider Vrabel, it's borderline insane. Vrabel has to be one of those guys, whether it's a list of 3, a list of 5, he has to be on your list. He's on my list. If he's not on your list, I would say check your list, maybe check it twice, ho, 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 almost Christmas season, and make sure that you have that list and just write down Vrabel's name on it. He has to be considered. Why? Well, first, I know people will say he's from the Patriots. He's the Patriot way, Bill Belichick guy. Vrabel left Belichick. Vrabel left the Belichick Patriot way. Vrabel decided to go outside of the Patriots bubble to continue his football education. That is a major difference from a lot of the other guys that we've seen, the Matt Patricias, the Joe Judges, the, Josh McDaniels, those guys that have just kind of stayed within the system for years and years and years and then get a shot. Vrabel voluntarily left the system and said, I'm going to go elsewhere to learn more about football. And yes, I'm sure some of that had to do with the trade to Kansas City, which Vrabel mentioned multiple times during his Hall of Fame speech a few weeks ago. But Vrabel made the conscious decision to go somewhere else, to look at different ways to coach. He went to Ohio State, so he went to the college game. And he kind of saw how college football and how football overall was starting to evolve. He got himself out of the Patriot bubble. He got himself out of the NFL bubble. He goes down to the Ohio State and tries to start to figure things out as far as where this game is going. Then he goes to Houston, gathers a little bit more intel before he ends up in Tennessee. So he is not somebody who has just been stuck in the Patriot way, stuck at Gillette Stadium for years and years and years, chained to the radiator, reading Belichick books. He hasn't been that guy. He has shown that he wants to learn more. He wants to evolve. He wants to become as good as he can become and understands that sticking with one system the entire time and learning one way isn't the way and isn't the best way to push forward. Number 2, his resume. I mean, he just won the Coach of the Year 2 years ago, 2021 Coach of the Year. People might look at the last couple of seasons and try to make that an indictment on Vrabel. I would disagree. Before Ryan Tannehill got injured last year and missed the last 3 or 4 games, Vrabel's record in Tennessee was 47-30. He was 47-30 before Tannehill's injury last season. This season, we all knew where Tennessee was headed, right? We all understood that this is an aging roster. Tannehill is most likely not the guy anymore. They were going to try to mix in possibly some young quarterbacks with Levis and Willis. Derrick Henry is somebody who's, on his last leg, seemingly as a running back at 29, 30 years old. So before the Tannehill injury last year, the Titans were 6-6 with Tannehill a season ago. Before that injury, when Tannehill was done for the rest of the year, this is a coach that led the Titans to a 47-30 record. Somebody who's made the playoffs in 3 of his 5 seasons as an NFL head coach. Somebody who made an AFC championship game. And he's done all of this without a truly contending elite roster. This roster has never been considered top 7 in the league. He went 47-30 with a pretty good roster, made 3 of 5 playoff years with a pretty good roster, won the Coach of the Year 2021 with a pretty good roster, made an AFC championship game with a pretty good roster. We're not talking about somebody who had an embarrassment of riches. That's not what we're talking about here. His guys play hard. They play hard for him. He has just unbelievable amounts of credibility from his playing career. I mean, read all the anecdotes, listen to all the interviews of his former teammates and coaches. Just go back to the Hall of Fame induction a few weeks ago. Tells you all you need to know about Vrabel's credibility throughout football. He's a former All-Pro. He knows how to relate to players. He knows how to hold players accountable. He himself is accountable. He has no issue delegating to the offensive staff. This is not Bill Belichick. What we have to do is we have to stop linking everybody who's had a Patriots uniform on and saying that's a Belichick guy. You can't hire a Belichick guy. Now, there might be somebody out there who's better than Vrabel. I'm not saying that Vrabel's the best option. All I'm telling you is you should not dismiss Mike Vrabel just because he played with the New England Patriots. I just think that's dumb. I don't think that's the way you go. This guy is willing to delegate. He has a proven track record. He's a former All-Pro in the league. He relates to the players. He has a voluminous amount of football information in his dome. And, recently, if you want to check this out, I would suggest that you do. There was a great article in The Ringer back in August by Kevin Clark, and it was on Vrabel. And here's what Clark wrote. He had traversed multiple eras of football, from brutal Steelers and Patriots training camps as a player in the late 90s and early 2000s to more modern practice setups. And has blended that wide-ranging football education together to create his own style. He is equal parts hard-ass and empath. He cares deeply about his players, but he also cares deeply about getting his point across. So if you just take a look at this story, more modern practice setups. He's learned from brutal years with Pittsburgh and New England. He has blended everything that he has learned in different spots to become the coach that he is today. And he continues to adjust. Let's go back to the Ringer story back in August on Vrabel. When he started to coach Jadeveon Clowney, he realized Clowney wanted to be coached from home and that Vrabel could coach from his office. Quote, you wanted him to respond to a text message, send him a video clip, and start explaining and coaching him whether it was good or bad or a little detail that needed to get fixed or he did something we had been working on, Vrabel said, unquote. You get an immediate response, Vrabel again, and it's okay. This is what these guys like. They like to see themselves. They like to watch it on their phone or whatever it may be. And Clark writes in The Ringer, this along with having two young sons at the time got the coach to adjust even more. So again, this is somebody who adjusts. This is somebody who learns from mistakes. This is somebody who's willing to evolve with the game. He's willing to evolve his practices. He's willing to evolve how he communicates with players like Clowney. Sounds like somebody who truly gets it. One last thing from the Ringer story. Vrabel's journey to understand as many schemes as he could started by playing many roles and in many complicated defenses. They talk about him playing under Jim Haslett. And, they'd introduce a blitz in Pittsburgh and they'd be practicing it 2 hours later. Clark writes his time with Belichick only accelerated that. Because of his varied football education, he does not, I want you to listen to this, he does not exclusively subscribe to any particular scheme. His former offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, who's now the head coach with the Atlanta Falcons, said this is one of the major things he loved about working for Vrabel, how flexible his mind is. Open-minded, constantly evolving. One of the most intriguing names out there. I mean, if Mike Vrabel is going to be available this offseason, he has to be one of the most intriguing options for Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft. He has to be. And I just laid out all of the reasons why. I mean, it makes a lot of sense from the Patriots' point of view. Does it make sense from Vrabel's point of view? Well, new GM, right? They just hired a new GM in Tennessee. They don't really know what they're going to do at quarterback. They've got Levis. They've got Willis. Looks like Tannehill is most likely going to be gone after this year. Derrick Henry turns 30 years old in January. The one obstacle, if Vrabel is open-minded and wants to come here, if the offer is out there for him, the one obstacle is that Vrabel did sign a deal, an extension in 2022. So he signed a contract extension last season. You would likely have to trade for Vrabel. That's the thing I would say that would make me hesitant. I am not in the business of giving up draft picks with this roster right now. So if you have to give up any significant draft capital for Vrabel, which I would think would be the case, that might be your answer. But as far as considering him, as far as whether or not he should be on the list, abso-freaking-lutely. All right. Will Bill Belichick allow this season to become 2024? Will he allow this to be about next year, not necessarily this year? We'll talk about that in a minute. And I always stress this to all of you. You are my advocates in this business. You need an advocate. I don't have advocates at 98.5 or EEI or any other, outlet out there in Boston pushing me and tweeting and posting about me. You are all my advocates. So when you when you comment, you subscribe, it means an awful lot. When you rate and you review on Spotify and Apple Pods, it means an awful lot. Continue to do so. I appreciate every single one of you. All right. This season now at 2-7 is about 2024. I think many of us, if not all of us at this point, agree on that. The question, though, for me is, will Belichick allow it to be about 2024? Or is he going to continue to be so hyper-focused on 2023, trying to win every single game that he can? I mean, this is a guy who's being asked about his job security at a press conference yesterday. This is new territory here in New England for Belichick. Is he going to be able to actually start sprinkling in some thoughts about how we might transition to 24 as a football team? Or is he just going to be locked in and week out, trying to prove everybody wrong that he can still win football games and that this team is still better than you think it is? It is a legitimate question. It is a concerning question if you're a Patriots fan or if you're in that organization trying to move the ball forward here. It goes back to the idea of head coach Belichick versus GM Belichick. We know what happened last week at the trading deadline. Head coach Belichick won out. Head coach Belichick beat up GM Belichick. Did not move anybody for any assets. Reportedly, Jacksonville was willing to part with a 5th-round pick for Uche. Again, I would have made that deal. He doesn't have a future with you. He played less than 20% of the snaps this past weekend. And yes, he's dinged up, but he never plays more than 35, 38% of the snaps. He's a sub-pass rusher. Why you wouldn't trade that guy who you're not going to sign for a pick is beyond me. Even if it's a 5th-round pick, a 5th-round pick is better than nothing, isn't it? So head coach Belichick beat GM Belichick last week. And head coach Belichick is solely focused on 2023 because of what's going on. We've seen this over the last week or two. I mean, head coach Belichick rolls out Juju, Rager, and Tyquan over Kayshon Boutte. Discussed it on yesterday's podcast. That is a 2023 move. Playing those receivers over your rookie receiver is a 2023 move. Earlier in the year, benching Pop Douglas after the fumble. That's a 2023 move. Not allowing the rookie to learn from his mistakes by playing football. Marte Mapu played 10 snaps on Sunday against Washington. He played those snaps at deep safety. When he was at Sacramento State, he played in the box. When they drafted Mapu, I was hopeful. Apparently, being an idiot while being hopeful, I was hopeful that they would play Mapu at linebacker. I've been screaming for this team to get more athletic at the second level. But they drafted Mapu, and Belichick has deployed him with pretty much a number of other guys to replace Devin McCourty, and it's not working. They keep throwing crap up against the wall to try to replace Devin because they never truly brought in a legitimate, qualified free safety. So you've got Mapu playing the back end where he's at his weakest. What are we doing with that idea? Why are you deploying Mapu on the deep end of the field? Play him at linebacker. Again, that's a 2023 move. Belichick is more concerned about plugging the hole of Devin McCourty at free safety instead of, hey, let's get this guy at least a few reps at linebacker to get him cooking, to see how he does, to get him ready for 2024, because that is what he is comfortable with. That's what he is best at. Square peg, round hole. I don't get it. But it's absolutely Belichick thinking 2023. He to me is right now, and I get it. He's a coach. Every coach wants to win every single week. That's the goal. But Belichick is stuck on the W. He's stuck on the W versus the L. He's stuck on Don Shula's record. He wants to prove to the world that this team is better than people think. And he is making decisions every single week with 2023 in mind. Is that going to continue? If we're talking 2-8, if we're talking 3-8, if we're talking 2-9 after the bye, if they lose to the Giants, God forbid, without Daniel Jones, is he still thinking 2023? Is he still not playing Mapu? Is he still playing Mapu out of the spot he should be playing him in? Is he still sitting Kayshon Boutte and trying to get anything out of Juju to prove that he wasn't wrong for signing Juju Smith-Schuster? Or does he eventually move on and say, this is about 2024? By the way, I don't have a problem with Belichick coaching out the year. I know some people are wanting to fire him right now. The only positive, if you let Belichick walk right now, is that you could put Mayo in that spot and see how he does the job. But I think that would be unfair to Mayo. There's really not much to gain by letting Belichick respectfully coach out the year. I mean, this guy did win 6 Super Bowls. He was one of the most successful coaches in all of sports for 2 decades. And I know some people want to say, oh, Tom Brady. I get it. But I don't think this team wins the Super Bowl in 0-1 without Belichick. There's no way that happens. I think Belichick helped this team over and over and over again get to Super Bowls and win Super Bowls. You don't get to Super Bowls without Belichick's game planning against Peyton Manning. You don't win in 2018 without Belichick's game plan against Sean McVay's offense in a defensive-minded Super Bowl. So we don't have to sit there and dismiss everything that Belichick's accomplished. To me, that's silly. He has brought a ton of success to this organization. He has made this organization, along with Brady, super relevant. He's made Robert Kraft hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no need to dump the guy in the middle of the year. Let him coach it out. But I do understand, there's a risk that his focus, again, is on Shula. And with that focus being on Shula, he's not doing the things that you would like him to do to kind of push this transition forward. All right, we'll talk Red Sox offseason in a moment. First, rate and review. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up for me, comment, and subscribe. All the subscriptions mean an awful lot. All of the likes mean an awful lot. All of the comments mean a lot. I went back and forth with a lot of you yesterday about yesterday's podcast. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. All right, let's wrap some things up here with the Red Sox. Bob Nightingale this week reporting that the Dodgers are the favorites for Ohtani. Says the Cubs could be sneaky, but the Red Sox are also in the conversation. I understand people being in love with the idea of the shiny toy of Shohei Ohtani. The guy is incredible. I don't think Ohtani should be your number one priority. He's not going to pitch this year. He's now going to go through 2 Tommy John surgeries. You're going to have to sign him to a 13, 14-year contract, or at least 10 years. You're going to be dealing with his, age 36, 37, 38 years. So I don't think he should be the top priority. The top priority should be Yamamoto. And if you don't think Yamamoto should be the top priority, then I don't know what baseball team you watched this past season. And I don't know what you think the number one priority for this offseason is. I've been stating this over and over and over again. I've been tweeting about it. I've been talking about it. Pitching is the number one priority. One of the main reasons you brought in Craig Breslow was to address this pitching staff at all levels. And Yamamoto is that guy. He just turned 25 in August. He's in his mid-20s. Hasn't even reached his prime yet. Still 2-3 years away from his prime. Daniel Epstein and Forbes on Yamamoto wrote, he runs his fastball into the mid-upper 90s, splitters unhittable, throws a curveball that keeps hitters off balance with an untraditional release. Now, this was written on 9/11 in September, but Epstein wrote, control is one of his greatest attributes. He issued just 24 walks at a 4.2% walk rate. To put that into context, only 4 pitchers in the MLB have a better walk rate. Again, that's back in September with at least 100 innings pitched. Guy has great control. He has great stuff. He just turned 25 years old. A scout to the New York Post talking about, the stuff that Yamamoto has. It's ace. It's ace quality. A scout to the New York Post says full grade. This scout had Yamamoto a full grade better than Senga. And I remind you that Senga in his rookie season this year was an all-star, had a sub-3 ERA, had 202 strikeouts and 166 in the third innings. And scouts say Yamamoto is better than Senga. This scout said a full grade better than Senga. He's your number one target. He's at the top of the list. You start there and then you go elsewhere if you don't get him. But you start with Yamamoto. And if you swing and a miss, then you adjust. If you don't get Yamamoto, you look at guys like Aaron Nola. You look at Jordan Montgomery. I think you could do worse than Eduardo Rodriguez, by the way. I know some people, they look back and Erod had a little bit of an up and down, more up towards the end there. But, I think you could do worse than Erod coming back. But your first focus is Yamamoto. Try to get that done. Another story that could be Red Sox related, by the way. Craig Counsell, this was a crazy story. Craig Counsell goes to the Cubs, $8 million a year from the Cubs. Craig Counsell, new manager of Chicago now, and they said goodbye to David Ross. Just dumped Ross by the wayside. Thanks for all that you've done, but we're replacing you out of nowhere and hiring Craig Counsell. Why is this a Red Sox story? Well, number one, David Ross, obviously, with the Cubs, former Red Sox, somebody who has worked with Craig Breslow the last couple of years. Keep that in mind. I'm not telling you he's going to replace Alex Cora right now, but I would not be shocked if Ross is some kind of part of this organization this year with that relationship and his history here in Boston. But when you look at Counsell's contract, $8 million a year from the Cubs, let's not forget, Alex Cora is on the final year of his deal. So if you're looking to sign him to a contract extension, his number just went way up. Something to keep an eye on. Do the Red Sox approach Cora about an extension this offseason? Does Cora want to sign an extension? Or does he sit back and wait? But that Counsell number, we're talking about Cora, World Series champion manager. He's going to look at Counsell's numbers and say, he makes $8 million, I want $10 million. Give me $10 million a year. And will Red Sox ownership pony up $10 million a year for their manager? I know they like Cora a lot, but that ownership group, $10 million a year for the manager, that might be a tough sell. Might be a tough sell. And does Breslow, who's been here for a cup of coffee, is he even in position to make a decision on Cora for the long term? He didn't sound like that during his press conference last week. So some very interesting things happening in baseball. We will keep track of it all. Thank you for joining us. Again, rate and review on Spotify, Apple Pods. Give us that thumbs up on YouTube. Also, comment and subscribe. We have surpassed 1,000 subscriptions, all because of you. Love the support. Appreciate the support. Until tomorrow, it's the Nick Cattle Show.